For those of you who do not have the luxury of building a fresh duct system and thinking about like all the amazing things that you can do, you have a house that is a used house. Nothing wrong with that. There's lots of houses out there that are here. We need to figure out how to use them, how to make the best of a bad situation sometimes. And the HVAC that's inside of that house might be the kind of thing that makes you sad. It's not the end of the world to have an HVAC system that makes you sad. There are ways that you can fix it. And for that, I brought a special guest in today to talk with us about this. This is Zach Ortwine. Zach, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So Southeast Clean Air Solutions does duct cleaning, and that was what you and I so initially started talking about. But then you had like some ideas for some kind of outside the box ways of improving duct work. Can you kind of tell everybody just briefly where you're based and a little background about you?
So I'm based out of Richmond, Virginia, and I've been in the duct cleaning industry full time since March of 2017. Trailer park homes all the way up to biosafety for laboratories and anything you can think of in between. Member of the National Air Duct Cleaners Association, or NADCA, and I've been active in there kind of as a volunteer on many of their committees.
So these are some photos from a client of mine who had this system. And when you step up into an attic like this, it can
Yeah.
be, like I said, make you a little bit sad. So looking at this kind of thing, being like, okay, is this okay? Like it kind of looks like maybe it's not okay. We've got this flex dryer duct being used as the flue.
Yeah,
We
that's
have
definitely not okay.
Yeah, we've got like kind of it looks like duct board that's then painted with mastic. We have an atmospheric draft furnace. We've got duct supplies just sitting out and around. We have dirty insulation. This kind of attic just makes it so confusing. It's like having a messy room. It's like, where do I?
Yeah.
So we've got mold showing up on the collars here. And the good news for those of you who have ductwork that is in an attic, even though an attic is the worst place to put ductwork generally when you're talking to somebody like me or Zach, is that you can get at that and you can clean it. You can replace it. And that's one of the things that I'd like to ask you about in a few minutes here. You can
Yeah.
rewrap this, we can rerun it, we can do anything that we want to. We can then affect things about the enclosure itself as well. But when we have things like this is between floors. And this is a duct
Yeah.
boot that is coated with mold. One of the reasons it's coated with mold is that it's coated with dust. And that's because partly we've got a leaky duct system that's in an attic. It's picking up dust from the attic and then distributing it into the house. And this duct liner is part of the problem. So, like, there's so many things within this one picture that I want to kind of unpack with you. So, can you first tell us why are we putting boots? The boot is the box that like intercepts the drywall, right? That we're going to put the grill up.
Yep.
Why does this boot have insulation that is exposed to the airstream instead of being behind the sheet metal?
So it was originally designed for noise dampening properties to try to reduce the noise level of the fan when it turns on. Um, it's common for vent boots to sweat in an attic, especially in the southeastern region, humid climates, like down Florida, very common. And when there's air leakage at the vent boot because it hasn't been sealed with mastic and hasn't been properly insulated, or the as the air is leaking into the insulation, is actually degrading the R value more quickly. So we get a we get the insulation start to fail, the vent starts to sweat, and when you have that gap around the vent boot, that's our friction point right at the end, having the vent in the vent boot. So all the dust is naturally going to collect there. It'll collect there. It will collect at turning vanes. It will collect at the friction points in the system. Of course, the filter, but some of the dust will bypass. Um, and then in the summertime, when you have like really hot, humid attic air and you've got a cold vent surface and the air is trying to move from hot to cold, it starts to condensate actually on the back side of the vent, oftentimes in a humid climate. So, like in Virginia, where I am, it will sweat on the top side. That sweat gets onto the sheetrock where the dust collects. And you'll see this when you pull the fiberglass around a vent boot. Like when you start to remove it and pull it away, you'll see that it's kind of black and brown because it's been acting as the filter of the attic air coming into airstream. And a product that's trying to prevent condensation is also providing a medium. I've got like a little pocket microscope that I use. And when you look at it very closely, it looks like a filter. I mean, the texture of it is very rough and it's very much like a filter. So what happens is it latches on to the dust that collects in that airstream at that friction point. If you're handy and you can actually pull one of those vents down, stick your phone up and take a picture inside of the duct where it goes back, because most of the time it's going to be that vent boot gap and right like isolated there at the friction point right at the end of the run. But sometimes if it's all the way back to the air handler and it's actually throughout the system, that's why you take the picture down the line, is you're going to see, is this a 2 foot issue that I can reach, or is this a 10-foot issue that is beyond my
Yeah.
capabilities as a homeowner.
It
um,
seems like with this kind of a photo of flex duct specifically, which I would say is
yeah,
pretty universally enjoyed by HVAC professionals because it's very easy to install. You just stretch it out to length, you clasp it off, and then
it's very easy to
it's
install
pre-installed.
poorly.
That's right. And just like this. Like this is
Yeah.
not, you're the idea is to stretch it taut, which is actually hard.
Yes.
And actually, I mean, if we want to be honest, a flex duct that is stretched as tight as we want it to be for airflow is more likely to degrade and tear because it doesn't have any give, right? So when ozone then comes into the system and starts aging these materials, I mean, this thing is like 30 years old, it's going to have little rips in it. If it's tight, then it's potentially like pulling itself apart at that point. So if you do take a picture of the inside of the ductwork and you see what looks like microbial growth and at least crud up there, which by the way, just to remind everybody, mold loves to eat dust more than anything else because it's pre-chewed stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It's a great carbon source, and it's just it's beef jerky for mold as far
right.
as it's concerned. It's going to just stick like mud on your car and eat away at it, and it grows.
What would you recommend? Are you going to say, oh yeah, I'll come out and clean that, no problem?
So depending on the access to that ductwork, um, we have in Richmond, we have a lot of attic and crawl space access. If it's between floors, I can clean it, but it's going to be difficult to clean between floors. Um, so the way that I would go about cleaning something like that first would be, using an air whip to loosen most of what's on the surface. But then I'm probably going to have to, we have fiberglass rods and there's a wiffle ball attachment with like water rags on it. So I zip tie the rags onto the wiffle ball attachment and push it through almost like a softball so that I actually get a contact clean on that. But that's going to be very expensive. If I were doing that with every single line, it might be more economical to replace it with new ductwork.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And it
in an
seems
attic,
like,
because it really will take. I mean, it could be north of 30 minutes to really get what's in that duct out.
and are you worried about degrading this duct if it's older than 10 years old? Are you thinking that your process that you're putting it through is going to actually degrade it?
So yeah, so the first thing we do is we perform an inspection and an assessment on the condition of the ducts as we start, and we just got to see, will this stand up to the rigors of cleaning, and is there evidence of, like, if we see like water lines down the side because it was a floor vent sort of thing and like mop water got in or open window or whatever, I know that will degrade the mylar lining faster than if there's not. So I always just make it a point to educate the homeowner on, here's our situation. I can try this. It might work, it might go wrong. So we have to plan on worst case. Worst case, I could tear it because the lining is just too compromised for the cleaning. But I would still try to clean it and see if it's feasible and just be as gentle as I can and see if I can save the homeowner the money in that situation of having to replace the duct or cut into the ceiling, just depending on where
Mhm.
the access to the ductwork is.
And to be perfectly clear with everybody who does not understand how this stuff works, what is behind that plastic mylar duct, if you tear it, is fiberglass. And that then can get into your airstream, and then you've got fiberglass floating around inside your house, which is generally not what we are looking for when you're trying to make the house better, more
Yeah.
more healthy.
And
So
really, you really would want to pull that duct nice and tight, even though the ozone side of it can be a little bit more of a consideration. What happens when you have it nice and straight and tight, you get a lot less dust that sticks in there. As it sits in like that photo, that's like speed bumps for the air and for the dust to collect. In the air diffusion council, or the basically the duct installation handbook for flex duct, right? They attach a piece of flex duct to two machines and they pull it for 60 seconds with 20 pounds of force to set that coil on the inside, the spring that actually coils around the mylar lining. And you really want to get that really to 4% compression or less. And that's going to be if you have 24 linear feet to run it and you have 25 feet, that's about as much forgiveness as they give you.
this gets at, you know, I installed my own duct system in my house because partly I wanted to see what it's like. I wanted to experience what HVAC guys go through. If you have never installed this stuff and tried to pull it tight and then fasten it, because that's the thing that you need to do is you pull it tight and then you got to like with one, you got one hand pulling it tight. Then you have to use one other hand to try and get things like if it's a screw that you're putting through to try and, or you're using a clamp, a pipe clamp, kind of a strap or what. But
Yeah.
this gets at the other thing, which is problematic, which is if we have this boot, for example, and we're going to get at in a second, Zach has an idea for how to potentially encapsulate this thing, which I want to have him tell you about. But in the meantime, if we can just take this thing out because it's that contaminated, it's like, we're not even going to worry about trying to save this thing. Let's get it out of there. Then we are able to, when you pull it out, if it's not taut, I can pull the flex duct and disconnect the flex duct and let it go back into the ceiling where I can still reach it. But then when I put the new boot in that does not have this problem, how
Yep.
in the world am I going to connect the flex to the outside of my new boot that's in there inside of a ceiling cavity?
That boot's not as bad as some of the things that I've seen. So that one I'd probably vacuum with a HEPA vacuum and a brush. And then I would actually put that coating encapsulant for it. Basically seal the fibers down, but also seal any of the growth that's impinged in the fibers separate from the moisture source in the airstream. It's a product called Hardcast RE500. When it dries, the surface of that paint is it's antimicrobial on its own. If you get enough dust on it, things can grow on it, like dust and moisture. You gotta address the underlying causes. But you can also starve what's underneath the barrier. It's almost like think like a latex paint in texture and consistency, where if it can't get the moisture that it needs, it'll go dormant and it won't be in the airstream any longer. So if I were in that kind of situation where there's not a very good opportunity to replace it without a major surgery on the home, then the next best option would be to pull that lining out. And if we're between floors, we shouldn't have the condensation issues as much, but homes aren't that tight all the time. We know
Right.
that.
I'm linking a video on screen right now of a house in Florida that had this kind of they had a cantilever at the front and the back with vents in it, and there was just a tunnel of outside air moving through there. And yeah, that they grew mold because of ducts that were up in that.
Yeah. Another option would be you could scrape out that insulation, get new duct liner, coat it while it's new,
Hmm.
and install that in the box. That's going to be if you have access to that liner pretty easily. It's available for you.
Excellent.
Um, so
Okay.
I have a roll of insulation liner that I have just for those weird situations and for demonstration stuff as I show people. I give people samples of here's half coated, here's not, and that way you understand when I tell people this is this is an additional step on top of a regular duct cleaning. For like a metal and flexible duct, I don't have to coat after a cleaning. So there's no legal regulation over duct cleaning in most states. There are some states where you have to have a mechanical license to access the system, but there's no EPA or federal government saying you got to follow these rules. The National Air Duct Cleaners Association it's a choice, and it's specced into a lot of the commercial bidding. So there's good value in the training, and as as an industry association that really wants to advance doing things well.
When you're shopping for somebody, should you look for that certification?
Yes, on their website they have a find a professional tab. Call a couple of them in your area and ask about the technicians that they would be sending to your home on
Ooh,
that page. So
nice.
say,
So it's not just
hey,
the company that's certified, it's the individual installers or
yeah,
the
companies are not certified. There are NADCA member companies, but only technicians are certified.
great. Okay, good to know.
So you have to have at least a certified technician to become a NADCA member, but they might not always be the one in the field. So
Yeah.
that's why I recommend find the service providers in your area and say, all right, which technicians would I have coming to my home? Will one of them be NADCA, like ASCS or Air System Cleaning Specialist certified? Because it's a high turnover industry. I mean, it's a dirty job. It's in tough environments. It's not the most glorious, it's not a AI software programmer or something like that. Like it's hard work. So
Not
there's,
mainstream sexy, but it's sexy. I mean, you and I know how sexy it is.
yeah.
So let me ask you this. Is it possible that somebody would come out and use a tool, a cleaning brush head, like you were describing, zip tying, soft cloths onto a wiffle ball,
So
or using
that's a
the
custom technique that I do.
right, right. But the air whips, I know that you can get them where they're like pretty nasty and they're built for steel to like really bust stuff off of steel. It would really shred that soft flex duct. So is it, what's the
You
likelihood of having somebody who's not certified actually do harm to your ductwork?
it's very likely even someone that's certified can still do harm to it if they don't have the experience of like just it. I have still torn ducts after years of cleaning, and largely actually because of the straps on flex ducts would become a pinch point. So as I'm trying to move the tool through it, and then I try to force it instead of um, what we used to do is I'd try to bounce the head or try to get it, but you can only get so much movement in a 6-inch round boot that's going at like a 90-degree angle.
Hmm.
So sometimes you push the head through. What we learned from that is if we actually support those ducts correctly, straighten them up, and install them the way they're supposed to be, much easier to clean.
Hmm.
So that's kind of why duct renovation and duct cleaning it's like two strands of DNA as part of the service. I don't want to have to run to the store and get a new piece of ductwork because I was too lazy to just disconnect it at the home and pull it straight and pull it tight. And then when I do disconnect it, I can also clean it for us in the attic or crawl space and not even have to, I can put a magnet over the vent in the home and really pull everything backwards while it's straight and while I have suction at the trunk line.
Okay, so as far as that goes, the process is you use this whip to like
Yeah.
dislodge a lot of the stuff that's on the inside of the duct, whatever kind of material it is. And
Yep.
at the same time, you've closed off all the other outlets except for one, and you're pulling with a vacuum through that, right? Are you pulling through the
Sometimes.
one that you're beating?
So, yeah. So it depends on the size of the duct system and the strength of the vacuum that you have. Um, like if I had my gas vacuum at the trailer park, like the trailer duct system that's, 4 inches tall and 28 or 30 gauge metal, it would collapse it if I close everything else off. So you have to have makeup air, like a vacuum cleaner has to have some air that comes in. You have to have, with a strong enough vacuum, a couple of vents adjacent that can actually provide that makeup air for the suction of the vacuum to move the air It's
But it's safe to say there's math involved in what you do. You have to be thinking about
yeah,
pressures and airflows and contaminants and moisture,
yeah.
all the things that
Now,
are.
electric vacuums like a 220 volt, maybe 5,000 CFM range on a pretty decent unit. Um, there's probably going to be enough duct leakage that you really do want to seal every vent off except the one you're cleaning. If it's a heavy contaminant, so floor vents specifically, ceiling vents are a lot slower to get dirty. Dust and things are lighter, and it will work fine for ceiling vents a lot of the time as long as the dust is light. But like floor vents and the things that are heavy getting into the duct system, those are not going to. They'll clog the filter up a lot faster. So as that's getting dirty, you're losing suction. And in those situations, you really want to have all the other vents sealed off because you're working with a diminishing level of suction.
So just to be clear, you're saying that you have a vacuum that is gasoline powered
Yeah, I mean, it
for
looks
your
like a
high.
leaf vacuum. Yeah, I got a couple.
Great. Well, this has been a ton of really great information. Thank you so much for sharing all this, Zach.
Absolutely, I'm happy to.
All right, we're gonna have you back on the channel. If you have questions, comment below, add your questions that you want me to bring to Zach next time. Like, subscribe, tune in next time.